Hey friends, John Gray Brothers, Truth Factor, Trust Me. It is Saturday, the 11th of January, 2025, and I'm inside. It's a rest day, so I'm gonna start. We're gonna start doing a video series here. We're gonna focus on love for a while. We're gonna talk about love. What I do on this YouTube channel is I share with you my personal testimony, and I share with you how I met Jesus and God in my apartment in 1991 through a supernatural encounter that I had with God. You see, I learned that day that God was real, that God is not some character in a book. God is not some idea of the past. God is really a living entity. He is a real living entity. He's the spirit of life, I would say. I think the Indians used to call him the Great White Spirit. He's real, okay? And see, before that, I was a science guy. My dad was a professor at a university. I graduated with honors in mechanical engineering. I was a polytheist, and I didn't even know it. What is polytheism? Well, I believed in the philosophy of science. Science was my religion. I believed in evolution. I believed in Darwinism and evolution. Science was my religion. You say, well, science isn't a religion. No, science is a religion. In fact, science is probably the biggest, in the Western world, the biggest religion in the whole world. Everybody's believing in technology. Everybody believes in the miracle of science and all this stuff. It's a religion today. If anybody tells you otherwise, they just don't understand the truth. They don't understand. I was like that. I believed in the philosophy of science. If I couldn't see it, if I couldn't touch it, if I couldn't feel it, if I couldn't sense it with my senses, if I couldn't reason it with my natural mind, if I couldn't research the topic and reason with my natural mind, then I wouldn't believe in it. You see, my faith was in the philosophy of science. I could talk to you hours about this. There's a guy that comes on YouTube named Gary Wayne, and he wrote a book called The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, and he gets into a lot of his work is in ancient civilizations and understanding the polytheistic pagan world that was in the earth for thousands of years. All our Western civilization, our academic civilization, is based and built upon the foundation of polytheism. Many gods. That's where we get the pantheon of gods. Well, modern academia today is founded on what we call the 7 sacred sciences. This is where we get all the departments of philosophy and music, and it's all based in these ancient teachings that when you research them all the way back to where they came from ancient angelic teachings, based in the teachings of angels, okay? This is polytheism. This is where we get the pantheon of gods. The Greeks had their gods. The Egyptians had their gods. In fact, there was an Egyptian philosopher named Manetho, I think, is the one who developed the philosophy of education and the 7 sacred science, schools of science and all that stuff, was all founded way back in ancient Egypt stuff. Okay, so this is where we get, the teachings of Hermes and all this stuff. So this is ancient stuff. All right, so what you say, why am I getting into that? Because today's world, people don't realize that they're not taught that. They think, well, we live in a Christian world. We live in a polytheistic world. People believe in science. Okay, now I'm not knocking science. I was an honor student in mechanical engineering. I know what science is. I know it's like a tool. It's like a hammer and a nail. It's good to hammer nails in. It's just a tool. It's never meant to be something you put your faith in. Well, what I found out when I placed my faith in Jesus Christ in 1991, my whole world began to change, and it blew my mind. I had this born-again experience in my apartment. Like I said, I met Jesus and God in my apartment, and it changed my world. I was no longer placing my faith in this 3-dimensional material plane that we live in. My faith was in Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the Messiah of Israel. I placed my faith in Him, and this whole new life opened up to me. You see, science today believes that there's anywhere from 11 to 26 dimensions. Well, when I put my faith in Jesus, this whole new world opened up to me, because God works in all dimensions. God's multi-dimensional, multifaceted. He's the creator God. He's the one who created all this. Okay? So, what we're going to talk about in the coming, like say, week, we're gonna be doing when I do my faith walk, we're gonna talk about love. We're gonna talk a lot about how God conquered the world about 2,000 years ago. God, by bringing the new covenant to the earth, God literally conquered the world with love. Okay? People don't realize before the life of Christ, before Christ was here, the world was steeped, it was corrupt. It was brutal. The way they lived back then compared to the way they live now. Now I'm not saying the world today is not corrupt. It's corrupt, but it was brutal back then. Think about it. If you didn't bow and worship the pagan gods of the nation you lived in, they would sometimes kill you. They would throw you in the lion's den, or throw you in the fiery furnace, or they would throw you in Rome. They would throw you. They threw the Christians in the Colosseum and had the lions eat them. So it was brutal, man. If you didn't believe the way they believed, you were ostracized. You were kicked out. You were many times killed. Okay, and so this is if you challenge the gods of that nation. You remember, it was a polytheistic world. You challenge, say, the gods of Rome. You had some heavy consequences many times as were a result of that. So people were very careful about certain things. It was a brutal world. It was a tough world. Think about it. They were crucifying people at the time of Jesus, hanging them on a cross with nails. It was a brutal world. And when Jesus comes, after the life of Jesus, we enter into this, what we call the age of grace. This new age begins when God brings his Messiah to the earth. And we're going to talk a lot about that this week. And we're going to talk about issues of what the age of grace is like compared to how the West has changed over thousands of years. I have a link in there. If you want a guy who talks about it way better than I do is Jonathan Cahn. Go watch his video called Return of the Gods. And you'll see that when Jesus comes, and as the gospel begins to be preached over all the earth, God literally begins to conquer the world with love. Jesus said this, all power in heaven and earth has been placed in my hands. Okay? And then he told his disciples, he says, now I give you power over all the works of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means harm you. So when you place your faith in this new covenant with Jesus Christ, this God-given authority, this God-given power now is made available to the disciples, and they began preaching this gospel all over the earth. And think about it. It was through the preaching of the gospel that these demonic pagan entities are driven out of nations. Some nations were there's story after story of tribes, like missionaries would go into Africa and preach the gospel to them, and all kind of evil spirits were on this tribe. And as they preached the gospel over, the tribal leaders began to accept Christ and the gospel, and how God's Spirit literally forced these evil spirits out of these tribal communities. And today they're not demon possessed like they were before. So God literally begins to drive out the demonic forces over all the earth, and it all began with the preaching of Jesus, the preaching by Jesus Christ, who is the Messiah of Israel. So this is what Jesus said, just to give you a taste of what we're going to be talking about. Jesus said this. He said, like I said, all power in heaven and earth has been placed in my hand. Paul said this, I am not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation for everyone who believes. See, when you believe in the Messiah, God's Messiah, when you believe in the new covenant that God has given to man through Jesus Christ, see, this new covenant is not a religion. This new covenant is not the Muslims' covenant. This new covenant is not the Jews' covenant. This new covenant is not the Christians' covenant. This new covenant is the Messiah's covenant. This new covenant runs through Jesus Christ, the Messiah of Israel. And this new covenant is going to last forever. It's going to be the foundation of the Messianic age. So if you reject this Messiah, you're not going to make it to the Messianic age. So Jesus comes and he says this to the Jews. He's beginning, see, salvation is to the Jew first. So Jesus begins preaching this gospel message to his people Israel. Many people rejected him. The corrupt, the apostate religious Jews, These Pharisees, these apostate religious Jews of his day, rejected what he said. They had corrupted the priesthood, and Jesus was speaking against them. And Jesus said this. He said, it was the law and the prophets. He was teaching the religious leaders. In other words, all that stuff you're teaching us about rabbinic Judaism, all that Pharisee religion, he said this is what it was. It's not like that. It was the law, Moses' law, and the prophets all the way up to John. He says, since the time of John until now, meaning until now that I'm here, the Messiah is here, until now, the kingdom of God is preached and every man presses into it. And so what we're going to talk about is the kingdom of God being preached and how God's Spirit literally transforms nations. And today, God's Spirit has run all over the world, and all the world today knows who the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is through faith in Jesus Christ. And this all began through one man, Jesus Christ, who God called to bring the new covenant to the earth about 2,000 years ago, when God fulfilled the prophecy spoken of by Daniel in Daniel 9:24. God tells Daniel, the angel Gabriel tells Daniel, listen up, Daniel, I need you to understand this. 6 things that God is about to do in the earth in this 490-year window. 6 things that the Messiah is going to do when he comes to the earth. He's going to finish the transgression. He's going to make an end of sins. In other words, fulfill the Levitical sin offering system, make an end of sins. He's going to usher in, and he's going to make reconciliation for iniquity. Why? Because God's people, Judah and Israel, had broken Torah, and their iniquities had separated them from God, and they were involved in apostate beliefs. And Jesus comes to the earth to reform Judaism. That was his call, was to reform what was going on in the temple. That's why he went in the temple, knocked the tables over. He was saying, no, not this stuff anymore. He was trying to rectify the problem. So he comes to make reconciliation for iniquity. Number 4, God uses the Messiah to usher in everlasting righteousness. Not a temporary righteousness, but an everlasting righteousness that lasts forever. And how does it last forever? Through Jesus Christ today, we have on planet Earth, we have everlasting righteous relationship to God, and we can connect directly to heaven through God's Messiah and the new covenant, and have everlasting righteousness made available to us today all the time through God's Messiah. Number 5, he has to make an end. He has to seal up the vision and the prophecy, and he does that through the preaching of end time events. Jesus does that. Then he comes back, and then he gives John, the Apostle John, the final book of Revelation that seals up the vision and the prophecy for the end, for this messianic age. He seals up the vision. And number 6, God has to anoint the most holy. Who is the most holy? The most holy is God's Messiah, Jesus Christ. So those 6 things, God tells the prophet Daniel around 600 BC, the 490-year window, that it's going to happen. And before the Messiah had to come before the destruction of this second temple, and that's exactly what happened. History proves it. The words of the prophets prove it, that Jesus is the Messiah of Israel. And we're going to talk about how the life of Jesus Christ over the last 2,000 years has transformed our earth and our world, and nations, literally tribes and nations have been transformed by the gospel of Jesus Christ. So this is John Gregory Bear encouraging you to tune in next week. We're going to talk about the journey of love, and we're just going to keep going with this journey of love message, and no telling where it's going to lead. And I want you to have a good weekend. Today's Saturday. I'll catch you on the next video. Open your mind to the ways of God. Open your heart to God's love. You just might be surprised. I'll catch you next video.